Welcome to the Meg and Maggi Podcast, where we bring you conversations of overall wellness. We believe in challenging the all or nothing approach to our health by focusing on simple and sustainable practices for your everyday life.
We are so happy you're here with us. Now let's get into today's episode.
Everybody, welcome back to episode, what is this, Mag 50? No, 66?
66,
yeah. Everyone. Welcome to episode 66. It is so fun to see like the number of episodes, and every time we meet new people, Maggie, I don't know if you get this too, they'll be like, oh, you have a podcast, that's so cool. And I'm like, yeah, and they'll go to like search it right there and they're like, you have a lot of episodes. Like that's always like quite the feedback we get, and it's true. We really have come such a long way. So today we wanted to bring more of a fun, lighter episode. We love bringing you value, and we always will. It's always going to seep into every episode that we do. But we wanted to do something a little on the lighter side. So we were kind of brainstorming for this episode, and we had been seeing a lot on social media about like the trend, like core memory, which is so nostalgic and light and fun. And we were like, you know what, let's do a whole episode on core memories. And obviously we don't want to just like dump our entire life story on in one episode. So we were like, let's pick a time frame in which we want to unlock our core memories with our listeners. And we chose college because college for me was like this little 4-year, well, if you include my master's, 6 years, time capsule of every human emotion that could possibly exist was like in a pressure cooker for 6 years.
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely.
Every human experience of emotion went down in this steaming, hot, fiery clusterfuck of life in college.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with that. And it's funny because I don't find myself thinking about college that often. Like, you know, I think about it as a whole, but not about the individual pieces or, you know, little components or things like that. So even as we had just started talking about it before we hit record, I'm starting to think of all these things. And as you mentioned, like all the different emotions, I'm like, oh yeah, all of those definitely did exist. Like,
oh yeah,
all of them, all the time, on every extreme.
And it was the most funny because now, as a few years removed and like more of an adult, if you will, I feel like I am more, I experience sometimes 2 emotions at the same time, but usually I kind of ride the wave of 1 to 2 tops. In college, I remember feeling like 5 at a time. Like it just, there was so much. And I think it's because it was so new. Like you were out on your own, you're trying to make it or just barely hanging on or whatever it is. There's so many things going on at once. So let's kind of start from the beginning and kind of like walk you guys through our experience. So when I first got to college, I went somewhere like 5 hours north of my hometown, and I did not adjust quickly at all. Like it was actually very difficult for me to adjust, which I guess I didn't know how I was going to do because, you know, you just don't know. But I got there and I really struggled hard for the first month. Like I remember, it's really sad, I didn't have roommates at first because it was like just a small college. And yeah, for a minute I didn't have a roommate. And then I eventually got one. Well, while I didn't have one, I was up there all alone, didn't know anyone yet. And I remember crying myself to sleep many times. I love how we're saying like, let's have a fun light episode. And then I'm like, I hysterically cried myself to sleep. But because I'm going to tell you about so many of my fun and amazing memories in college, I have to start with the fact that like I was beyond depressed, like so lonely, and I was 5 hours away. So it's not like my family could come up every weekend. It's not like I could go home every weekend. Like it was too far, which in hindsight was a really big blessing because it forced me to deal with those emotions. So yeah, college started out on a rocky foot for me. So if anyone can relate to that, like I I really went through it for a minute. I definitely was slipping into a depression. I definitely was struggling. And so college and I started out a little rough.
You weren't
What
best
about you,
friends,
Maggie?
that's for sure.
No, we weren't best friends.
Yeah, no, not best friends. Same for me. I was very lonely. So especially at that time in my life, this still carries over because I think it's kind of just part of my human existence and like my personality. But it was amplified during that time of my life is that I struggle. I don't technically struggle making friends. People like me. I like people. It's not that hard. But in my head, I really struggle making friends. And I think that no one likes me. And I, because of that, don't put myself in positions to make friends. Right. And so I've overcome.
We can't blow past that.
No. I've overcome that a lot at this point. But at that time, I was so lonely because I was just like, there were so many people around and there were so many opportunities for me to make friends. But it was almost like I didn't allow myself to, on some weird backwards way, to reaffirm my story that I didn't have friends, you know?
That's why I'm like, I want to stay here for a minute because I feel like you're going to really relate to a lot of our listeners. Like, I think a lot of listeners will be able to be like, wait, Maggie, back up. I still feel that way. So I kind of want you to like stay here for a hot second.
Yeah, I still feel that way too. And at this point, I can recognize that those ways of thinking and those beliefs that I have about myself are not true. It's a story that has been, created from somewhere in my childhood. I don't know exactly where, lots of combinations of things, I'm sure. And, but it really, at that time in my life, because I was in a totally new environment, there were a couple people that I knew that started at Ithaca at the same time as me. And so that was, helpful a little bit, but even at the same time, like, I knew these people, I would have considered them my friends, and I still felt like they didn't want to be my friends, and it had nothing to do with them. It was all just in my head, like it was all just me convincing myself that no one wanted to be my friend, which was not the case. Like, if I gave people the opportunity to be my friend, I probably would have had so many friends, but I just didn't.
I didn't want to like blow by that because I was like, wait, that needs a minute, because I think a lot of people probably have felt that way and probably still do feel that way in a lot of ways. On the topic of making friends, I always found it really difficult to have surface level friends because I'm not a surface level person, and not everyone wants to go really deep with you, but it's my way of connecting. Like, I'm like, let's get straight to like the juiciness. And that's not always like socially appropriate, right? So I had a hard time making connections because everyone would just be like, da, 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 da. And I was like, okay, I don't know any of you, and this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had the opposite in the sense where I was like, okay, if it's too surface level, like I find myself like removing from people and like going and being like in my room. And I actually still deal with this as an adult, which is really interesting, but I am such a introverted extrovert. Like, it's wild. Like, I know a lot of people say like they can, go both. I am such like a homebody, and like I recover and heal in my home alone. And in the exact same time, if I give myself, my friend and I talk about this all the time, we'll get on the phone with each other and we're like, it's so true. We like really go and hibernate in our homes and in our spaces to like heal, which is what I did in college. I would like remove myself. And then if I gave myself, there's like a very thin threshold of a line that if I do that for too long, right, I then am slipping into a lonely, miserable place. I still do that at this time, truly. Yeah. And it's an interesting thing. And as time goes on, I'm learning the line a little more. Like, if I give myself more than like a day at home, if I'm there for too many days in a row, where I'm like, removing myself from the world, unplugging, which I love to do. And I soak that in. Once I pass that line, we go into a very negative, dark place. And I experienced that in college.
Yeah. I relate to that so much. And I think a lot of the reason why in college for us, because like we went to college right out of high school. So it was like we were the same age in college. And most people that go to college right out of high school probably have a similar experience, because you are thrown into a new world, right? Where we don't have the comforts of everything we used to know. And so now that line, right, is showing up. It's like, oh my God, like I've never noticed that I can feel this down before, because like you just had your routine and you were so used to everything that you did. Now it's like everything changed and we don't know where that line is, right? I relate to that so much because I'm very similar. I need my alone time. I need to spend time like away from people. But if I spend too much time in that state, it goes downhill very fast. Very, very,
very fast. Very fast, Maggie. Like if I am like an hour past my allotment of what I can be alone for, I go into such a dark place very quickly, and it's very difficult for me. Then I've got to work like overtime to get myself back out of it, to get back to that neutral place.
Yeah.
And so I experienced that in college, and especially with making friends and people. Like I just had a really hard time at first, and it got better like as I went. And one friend in particular, we met while I was in college, and we called each other, we're actually not friends anymore, but when we met, we called each other like best friends, soulmates, because we just fell in love with each other instantly. We went so deep, so fast. It was so all-consuming, and that's when I was like, oh, wait, okay, no, there's depth here. Like there's stuff here. Like I can really like be my truest self with this person. And I would say that meeting her kind of started to unlock that for me in a lot of ways, which was really, really special. And I'm really grateful for that. Because before that, I just was kind of like surviving. And I think that's really relatable. We have a lot of younger listeners that listen to our podcast, right? Like that 18 to 25 range. So if any of you are hearing this, like, I hope that's relatable, because it was not easy at first. Freshman year was just like getting my feet wet, trying to figure it out. And then it got a little bit easier as I went along, and still hard at the same time. Like we'll get into it, but it was definitely a transition, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said before about struggling with surface level friendships, I relate to that. I really also struggle with surface level friendships. I think most people do, and we just like put up with it anyway. I think most people just put up with it.
Amen, Maggie.
But yeah, so I really struggle with that. So and like you guys listen to the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, you see us, like, me at this point. Okay. Me, and Megan knows me, and that like, I'm just going to walk away. Like, I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'm done here. Bye. And like, that's pretty much how it goes. Like, I'm very polite, and like, I'm usually not rude and things like that.
I love that.
I'm just like, yep. Okay. So this isn't the situation for me. So I'm just going to leave now, and, so
I love
it. The thing about that though, is that my dogs are going to start barking. So just beware. The thing about that though, is that I also didn't give people a chance, and so, and I'm better at this now, because like you just said before, Megan, not everyone is ready to just like dive into their life story or things like on the first time that you meet them. And I'm not either. And so thinking back to that, it's like, if someone met me and I wasn't in a mood to open up to them or like, really like get to know them, and they just wrote me off, then
yes,
then it feeds into the cycle of, well, I don't have any friends. Right. And so it's something that I really had to work on because, do I want to just accept everyone and give all my time and effort and energy, kind of like what we were talking about last week, to everyone? No, I cannot do that. Right. Like you have to pick and choose at some point. But at the same time, it's like at that point in my life, I was too quick to just write people off and just be like, no, I don't like them,
Yes. And so was I. And I was also in my head a lot, similar, which I'm sure you can relate. And then we can kind of fast forward from here. But I was in my head so much of also at the exact same time, me writing them off, also thinking that every little thing was making them write me off.
Yes.
Such a like back and forth balance. So after I kind of like dove through that in freshman year, I'm really, really thankful. I don't even know what made me do it, or if I was just in such a low place in the beginning of college that I needed a therapist. But I got into therapy right away when I got to college because it was so accessible, right? Mm-hmm. Everything was so accessible for me in college. I feel very fortunate that I went to schools that like, healthcare related things were really accessible, and therapy was, I don't know if it was free or through insurance or whatever it was, but like there was no difficulty to access these things for me. Mm-hmm. And I feel so blessed because of that, because I really, really needed that support during that time. And so fast forwarding into the rest of my years of college, I had fun. Like I went out, I drank, I partied, but I always felt out of place with different crowds. So I still think I feel like this sometimes now. I struggle because I am not a wild partier. I'm really not. I'll go out, I'll have a few drinks, I have a great time, I dance, like I love to go out and like let loose a little bit. But I am not someone who can party Thursday through Saturday night. And I am not someone who can day drink and then night drink and then I can't do it. I never took any drugs. And I'm not saying this like, woohoo, go me. Like, believe me, I drank my face off many nights. But I was not into drugs. I never smoked weed. I still haven't to this day. Like I've never done anything but drink. And that was hard at sometimes because the crowds that I would want to hang out with, the people that allowed me to forget about being sad in my dorm room were the partiers, because there's a lot more going on. Think about it. There's strobe lights, there's alcohol, there's fun, there's chaos, there's, hooking up. There's just so much. How can you think about being that sad girl in your dorm room when you're blasted with music and liveliness and craziness, right? So on the flip side of that, there's also the come down from that.
Yeah.
Right? The next morning, the sadness, it's all over. He hasn't texted me back. They're not talking to me. I made someone mad. Like all that shit hit the fan the next day. And that was real in college. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people can relate to. And when I was going through, I just felt like I couldn't find my place for a really long time. And I felt like this in high school too. And actually, I still feel like this today. So maybe it's just a common theme of my life altogether.
I get that.
I felt like I never fit into a group. I didn't fit in with like the smart kids in the library. And then I didn't fit in with the party crowd. And then I didn't fit in, like, I was never able to fit into a group. And I think we've said this on an episode before, Maggie. I can't remember which one it was, but like maybe that was the whole point. Mm-hmm. Like maybe the whole point is that you're not meant to fit in with a group. Maybe the point is that you're a good, soulful human and you connect with people individually, and then you can go and be a part of these groups from time to time. Mm-hmm. And so leading into the rest of my years of college, it was all the things like we said, but I also was really lost a lot of times because I just felt like you're trying so hard to have it figured out at a time when nothing is figured out. And so if I'm speaking to anyone right now, any 19-year-old, 20-year-old, you're about to go to college or you're about to enter into the world, out of high school, it's that I don't think you're supposed to have it figured out. Not yet. And maybe not ever, right? Because when you have it figured out, then we become complacent a lot of times and we get in our comfort zone. And that's a place that I don't want to be personally. But those memories of feeling really lost are a core memory for me.
I 100% agree with that. And I had a very similar experience of not feeling like I fit into any group, right? So I was a part of a lot of groups. Like I was on a soccer team, I was on a basketball team, I worked for a different basketball team. I had this group of friends and this group of friends, and these people were in my major, and you know, these people, like lots of different groups of people going on, right? But I never felt like I fully fit in with any of them. And like you said, I also felt like I made more individual relationships with people within the groups. And I never really felt like I made a relationship with the group as a whole, if that makes sense. Right. And it was very painful because I never felt like I had, like, I never really felt like I was part of the group. I felt like the group was over here and then I was kind of like next to it, you know, and then I would leave that one and then go be next to another group and then be next to another group and be next to another group. And so I never felt like really part of anything. And like, I can't say that about everything because there were some things where I knew that over time, like for example, I worked with the men's basketball team at college and I worked with them for 4 years. And so the first year I felt like that I was just like next to the group. And then the next year it was like, yeah, still kind of next to the group. And then like my last 2 years, I was like, I'm fully a part of this group. You know what I mean? Because like so much time had passed that I developed that relationship, right? And so I think a lot of what happened was not enough time had passed for me to actually fully be part of a group. And so I just always felt like I was on the outside and like bouncing back and forth between different groups of people. And that was very, very challenging, but it was also my comfort zone, right? Because like diving into a group of people and feeling like I belonged was something that I was not comfortable with. And it like fit into my story of not really having friends or not really being part of the group and all that type of stuff. So it's interesting to look back and see that most of the way that it played out was all because of just what I believed about myself. You know, like I believed that I wasn't going to have a lot of close friends and therefore I didn't. I believed I wasn't part of the group and therefore I wasn't. Right. And it's wild how much power we have over our reality just by what's going on in our head.
I know. And I didn't have these words in college. I was not elevated enough to know this. And it would have been very comforting if I trusted in the universe then, or if I trusted in something greater, or if I, you know, trusted myself, but I didn't know myself. And I don't want to like be like, oh my God, I wish I had that, because those were the forming years of that existing, like that taking inventory of all of those years and all of those beliefs is exactly the point. Right. And so to bring comfort to anyone who's like, you know, trying to figure it out and stuff like that, like these are the waves that you just need to ride in your 20s, I think a lot of times, and maybe even beyond that. There's always waves we're going to have to ride, but especially in the beginning, it's very messy and complicated. And just when I thought like, oh my gosh, I found like such a special group, like something would happen or something would, you know, be torn away or this or that. Like it was just such a messy time. And at the same time, I had the absolute time of my life. I would go back to college for a weekend in a heartbeat. The fun, the freedom, the silliness, all of that aspect of it was really fun. But I'm trying to think like other like core memories of it. I think for this episode in particular, what I really wanted to bring to it was, if anybody's in that place or going into that place, you're reminiscing and thinking about these things may still be affecting you even when you're out of college and high school and all of that stuff. And so to give yourself permission to reminisce and recognize that a lot of the things we were dealing with were just like limited beliefs and being in our head and insecurities. I feel like that's freeing in a lot of ways. Like the amount of insecurities I have had in college were mind blowing. I was so concerned. And so here's another like core memory. Add on, additionally from the friendships, you're navigating relationships with people, right? So boys in particular, I remember being so consumed with what do they think about me and how did it go and do they think I'm hot enough and and like all these questions. And then on top of that, body image struggles and eating struggles and this and that. Like, it's just, like I said, a pressure cooker of all the things, the joy, the pain, the craziness, like it's all of that. And so I really enjoyed going down memory lane for a second with you, Maggie.
Yeah. I really like the pressure cooker analogy. And I know we've been spending a lot of time on the kind of heavier emotions and, the struggles and things like that. But just as heightened as those feelings were, the excitement and the fun and all that was also so heightened, which was, looking back, it was very it was fun to be in those moments, and I enjoyed being in those moments when everything was great. And then at the same time, I am so grateful for my life now, where the extremes aren't so extreme, right? Like the ends and all the emotions.
Oh my gosh.
It's not so extreme because, like, I remember, like you said, it was kind of just like you're swinging back and forth between everything is so great and everything is so terrible and everything is so great. Everything is so terrible. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this again, And so I'm just grateful that that's not, life right now. But it was just like constant back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
That is the perfect way to describe it. It was extremes. It was either this is the best fucking day of my entire existence, or it was everything's crumbling and I'm dying. Yes. There was no in between. Yep. And I feel like now, like being removed from it, I'm very much so in the middle. And that's a lot of our message on this podcast too. But like, that's exactly what it was. I remember feeling like, so let's talk about some of the fun now. Let's do a little story time. I had fun, okay? And a lot of it was could have been arrested, could have like not, like there was a lot of stuff that went down. And, I remember being just not the most careful with a lot of things. The one thing I will say, and then I'll tell you about some of the things I wasn't careful about. One thing I will say that I was nuts about, and I was especially nuts about it with my friends, was one, drinking and driving. I was wild about that. Like I did not play with that and I didn't care at all. Like that was a firm core belief of mine. And the other one was safety of getting home and never walking alone, especially as a female. Like I was psycho about those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So with friends, like for example, I had a friend who was like, I'm just going to walk home now. And I was like, no, you're not. Like, because we went to like upstate New York schools where there was no Ubers yet. Right. Like that wasn't really a thing. When I was in my master's, it became a thing. But like when I was in undergrad, it wasn't a thing yet. So they're like, I'm just going to walk home. And I was like, you're going to walk home alone? Are you out of your mind? Absolutely not. Like we're all going to go with you. So those are things I'm proud of. The things I'm not proud of was unsafe sex. Okay. I didn't always have safe sex, and I got plan Bs. I told Maggie before we recorded, I don't want to say like M&Ms because that sounds terrible, but like way too often. Not proud of that in any way, shape, or form, but talk about being free. My God, was I free? Okay. And then just so many memories of, fake IDs and getting caught places and, sneaking in, and just everything was so extreme on one end and so extreme on the other. So when you said that, I was like, oh, that's how I would describe college.
Yeah. The fake IDs is funny because I really did not go out often in college. Like I worked 3 jobs. I finished my degree in 2.5 years. Like I did not go out often. Okay. And so, but when I did, my friend, one of my best friends, she's a year older than me, but we're in the same class. And so she had a fake ID and she actually had 2. And so when we would go into the bars, I would use one of them because we look similar enough. So I would go in first. Perfect. And then she would go in second. So when it got to her and they're like, we already saw this ID, but it was actually her. And then she actually turned 21. So she didn't need the fake ID anymore. So we just kept the system and it worked out pretty well. We never got denied, so it worked out. But just it's interesting. Like, how did we even come up with that idea? What is the thought process here behind this? Like, this was a good idea? Really?
I had a solid 2.5 GPA, but you needed me to figure out how to get into a bar. I became extremely intelligent, extremely fast, and manipulative as hell. And that is hysterical. On the topic of fake IDs, we would have like, anyone who knows me, like I am curvy, blonde, 5'10", like, and I would use an ID that said I was 115 pounds, 5'2", with dark hair. And it was pathetic how it would work. But I also remember my first year, I thought I wanted to be a nurse. So my first year as a freshman, I was working to get into nursing school, which at the time, I'm sure it's still competitive, but at the time it was really competitive to get into nursing school. Like you had to have like 4.0 A's across the board. Like that was just bare minimum. So I left my first college with like a, 3.8 or something like that. I get to my second college and because I transferred after 1 year. I think I'm the smartest person that's ever existed, ever. I'm coming with a 3.8. Like my head was so big. So I didn't do very much that next semester. I had a 1.7 the next semester. 1.7. We went from a 3.8 to a 1.7. I remember my mom is going to be listening to this, which I'm so glad I just shared that I took Plan B like M&Ms. I'm really excited for my mom to hear that. But I feel like I went from, talk about extremes, really great grades to really bad grades. And I had to quickly figure out how to find a balance because talk about like whiplash of like different things. Like I was a hot mess. But being a hot mess was also some of the best days of my entire life. You know what I mean? Like, oh, yeah, this is bringing me so much joy to just think about like all of this stuff. Also, you could not pay me to go back for very long. I would go back for about a night, but to go back and feel all of those extremes, you could not pay me any amount of money to go back and sit in that pressure cooker.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Mm-hmm. I would dip my toes in and I would get right back out.
Yep, definitely. I didn't go from such extremes with my grades because that was just like absolutely non-negotiable for me, like absolutely not. But like for me, like getting a B+ in biology was like my world was ending, like actually ending. Like I was just like the world was over, but with my like relationships and emotions, I was like, whoa, what is going on here? And like I was constantly in a relationship during college. I don't know why. I don't ask me why. I don't know. Like, I know why from like a childhood trauma perspective, but like from why we couldn't get past that and just enjoy college without a boyfriend. I don't know. But so it was just like not so much worrying about boys in the sense of like, do they like me because I had a boyfriend, but it was like the boyfriend situation. And then like you're spending too much time with your boyfriend and not with your friends. And then you're spending too much time with your friends and not with your boyfriend, like all that stuff. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not going back there. Nope, absolutely not.
I think we can sum up this episode with just one word of a lot. It's just a lot. Yeah. A lot of everything. And do you know what I really don't need anymore, Maggie?
What?
A lot of anything. I really try and be a pretty minimal, simple, mean, look at our fucking tagline, simple and sustainable. Like, it's just a lot. It's a lot that I can't relate to anymore, except for the fact that the memories are wonderful and I'm happy I have them, and I'm so happy to be out of them for a little while. But I'm really happy we went down this memory lane because, one, we just wanted to bring you guys something on the lighter, fun side, get to know us in a little more of a light way, but also to say, like, if you're in the middle of that now, or you're still struggling, if you are still in the pressure cooker of life and you're feeling like it's just a lot, I promise there's another way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Just slowly take off the center blocks of the allotness. I don't think that's a word. Is allotness a word, Maggie?
I don't know.
No.
Makes sense, though.
It makes sense, though. And you can slowly do that. And whew, yeah, that was fun. That made me feel like, I don't know how I feel right now. I kind of feel like, do I need to go take a shower? Like, do I need to like have a minute? But I'm happy we went there with you all. That was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Meg said, if you're out of that phase of life and you feel like your life still feels like that, I definitely encourage you to just take a step back, look at that for a second. If that's how you want to live, you go, you do it up for the rest of your life if that's what you want. But if it's not, you don't have to live like that. You don't have to.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. And I think a lot of it, Maggie, was just, and so this is actually really, really relatable in the sense that if your life now feels like a lot, the reason why college was so much is because it was created chaos. I purposely created chaos. And I think it was, a lot of times it was subconscious chaos, but it was created chaos, most likely to not deal with the shit that was underneath the surface.
Yeah.
Okay. So I started to deal with a lot of my shit right after college because a lot of stuff boiled up. I had issues in terms of, eating and body image. I had struggles with men and wanting them to like me in a certain way. And I had issues with, what else? Keeping grades at a steady plate, like whatever it was. I created all of this chaos that I didn't need to get to the root of it, right? So if you are feeling this, if you are feeling the a lot right now, we may be wrong, but take a step back, like Maggie's saying, take a bird's eye view and take inventory of, is some of the stuff you're doing creating chaos so that you don't have to go to the root of what is going on, right? I think there's a lot of value in that alone. So Maggie, to end this episode, can we do if you had to sum up your favorite core memory and maybe your worst core memory, if you want to share that? I think it might be fun to end with that.
Okay. I will preface this on the spot here. I will preface this by saying that these are definitely not my favorite or my worst, but that's just what's coming to mind at the moment. We have one on each end of the spectrum, but if I had more time to think about this, I would probably say other things. But I think one of my favorite core memories of college was, so for 3 years after my freshman year, actually, I think it started my freshman year, like all the way through senior year, I made a friend in one of my honors classes, which I did not follow through with the honors program because it was just stupid. And like you had to just take extra classes for no reason. But anyway, I made a friend, his name's Nate, and he was in my first honors class. And every Tuesday for all of college, me, my best friend, Nate, and his best friend, we would go Taco Tuesday. Every Tuesday, we would go have tacos. And that was just, we were all just friends and we would just all go get tacos. And it was just at the dining hall. And it was just like one of the best parts of college. Yeah. Yeah. Just like the consistent tacos,
Yes. I don't even know if we want to share our worst ones because that may just bring us right back down again.
Yeah, I think only good.
Okay, let's stick with it. So if I had to pick a favorite, there were so many. I would say my favorite memories were being probably in the library, which is so weird, super late at night, but not doing any studying. Like when I was in that. I would say some of my favorite memories were those delirious up late at night studying moments where you spend 6 hours there, but you probably only studied for about 25 minutes. And the rest was just like fun and like silliness and craziness with your friends. I would say that those are probably some of my favorites, like that twilight zone of I'm so sleep deprived and so high on life at the same time. You know, I would say those were some of my favorites. And then if I had to pick two, which look at me just cheating the system of what I asked you to do, which was share a favorite memory. I would say another one would just be dancing, like dancing, listening to music, being in a bar, being in a club, like being on stage at a bar or club or on the bar. Yes, Mom, you heard that correctly. Just like being really free and dancing and having like the time of life. Those are probably my favorite memories.
Sometimes
this is a fun episode.
It was. Yeah. I actually was just thinking about this yesterday because it pops up sometimes. I'm like, remember how I used to live and just like not care about having a bed or not care about having any sleep or not care about having food consistently or anything. Like I just, sometimes I'm like, it was a little bit easier. Did I feel good? No, I did not. But not having to worry about all those things was sometimes I just wish I could tap back into that a tiny bit.
Or when my mom would send me like $50 and I thought I was loaded.
Yes.
Loaded. She would send me $50 and I was like, I am set for life. Let's go. Like that was another like, oh my gosh, just
all right.
Simpler, but also a lot of times. Okay, guys,
we got to go now.
We got to go now. And we hope you enjoyed this lighter, sillier episode. And leave us a comment on there. What is your favorite core memory? Doesn't even need to be college related. Or just, leave us some core memories. Come in our DMs. Tell us about it. I think it's a really fun trend that's going on. And the reminiscing of it is just really fun.
Absolutely.
So we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the entirety of this episode. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with a friend. Your support helps our show grow, and for that, we are extremely grateful. Please be sure to leave a 5-star rating and a review of the show. We'll see you next Monday with another episode of the Meg and Maggie Podcast. Love, Meg and Maggie.